In this demonstration, we're going to spend some time looking at how you configure a captive portal. Now, captive portals are very commonly used today. If you've ever used the wireless network at an airport or a hotel or maybe a restaurant, then you've most likely used a captive portal. What happens is after you connect your device to the wireless network, but before you're allowed to access the internet, you're redirected to a captive portal page. And on this page, you may be prompted to do several different things. You may be prompted to accept a usage agreement. You might be required to provide a username and a password, or maybe a PIN number to access the internet. You could even be prompted to pay a fee to access the internet. Now, there are a variety of different ways in which a captive portal can be configured. For example, many Cisco devices include captive portal functionality. Alternatively, you could also set up a server on your network and then configure that server to function as a router. And on this device, you could then install a captive portal. And that's what we're going to do in this demonstration today. In this demonstration, I have two networks. I have my standard wired network here that's connected to the internet, and I have a wireless network over here. Now, prior to starting this demonstration, this wireless network was connected directly to the internet. It's not anymore. What we are going to do is configure a captive portal right here so that when a user connects to the wireless network from a workstation, then they will be automatically redirected to a captive portal page where they must authenticate in order to be granted access to the internet. So let's go ahead and get going on this configuration. Now, one option for configuring a captive portal is to use a Linux distribution. Now, you could download a Linux distribution and configure the captive portal manually. That's kind of a lot of work, and it does take a certain degree of expertise. Or you can simply download a pre-configured ISO image that has a captive portal already configured. And that's what I've done here. I'm using a captive portal from a company called Untangle. Runs on top of a Debian Linux distribution. All you have to do to set up your captive portal is to secure a dedicated system that has two network boards, one connected to the wireless access point, the other connected to your standard computer network. Now, when we run this ISO image, it's going to install Linux on that system. So we want to make sure that anything we want on there has already been backed up and cleaned off prior to doing so, because it's going to partition and format the hard drive in this system. So we're ready to go. I've got the appropriate system. I've installed two network boards. I've connected them to the appropriate networks. And I've booted the system off of the CD I burned from the ISO image. So let's go ahead and start the installation process. I'm going to select Graphical Install. And we have to select our language. We'll go with English, United States locale. We'll use American English for our keyboard. And now I need to select my time zone. We're in the Mountain Time Zone. I'll select Continue. And we'll review the summary. We have enough memory installed in the system. The processor speed is adequate. We'll click on Continue. Now, it's warning us that the installation of this captive portal is going to wipe the hard disk drive in the system. Do we want to proceed? Yes, I've already cleaned off anything that was worth saving. Click Continue. Okay, it's providing me with a proposed partitioning scheme for our disks. Do we want to accept it? Yes. Go ahead and Continue. All right, so the necessary packages needed to set up the Linux distribution have been installed. We do need to reboot the system before we can go any farther, so I will click Continue. Okay, we've rebooted the system. Now we need to continue with the configuration of the captive portal. So I'll click Next here. We'll select our language to be English. Now we need to configure our captive portal administrative user. Provide that user with password. And we'll leave our time zone set to the default that we configured earlier. Click Next. Now we need to specify which network interface in the system is connected to the wired network that goes out to the internet, and which interface is connected to the inside network where the wireless access point is. And by default, it takes the first interface in the system and assumes it's connected to the external network, and that the second interface in the system is connected to the internal network. And that's exactly how I have it set up. So we don't need to make any changes here. ETH0 is connected to the internet, while ETH1 is connected to the wireless access point. So let's go ahead and click Next. Now we need to configure the network interface that's connected to the external network that has internet access. You could configure a static IP address if you wanted. I'm just going to go ahead and use a automatic DHCP supplied IP address. You can see the current configuration parameters. These are all just fine. If we wanted to, we could click test connectivity. We're going to skip that today for the sake of time. We'll go ahead and click next. Now we need to define how our internal network is going to be configured. We actually have two different options. One is to configure the captive portal device as an actual router. In this case, it will turn on DHCP on the internal network, and this system here will act as a DHCP server. In addition, as you note right here, it also enables NAT. So we'll have network address translation going on from the internal network to the external network, and this device will also function as the NAT router as well. If you wanted to, you could also configure this device as a transparent bridge, in which case DHCP and NAT are turned off, and this device simply bridges the internal network to the external network. Either way works fairly well. We're just going to do the router implementation for today, in which case the internal network interface in the system will be assigned an IP address of 192.168.2.1, and we'll use the default Class C subnet mask of 24 bits, and we'll turn the DHCP server on. Let's click next. And we'll go ahead and allow it to install upgrades automatically. Click next. The server itself is now ready to go. The captive portal, however, is not. There's still some work we need to do. So we click on Finish. And I do need to log into my account with this company in order to install the various applications we're going to need over here to configure the captive portal. I'll go ahead and click on Login to register. Now that I've logged in, I need to specify whether I want to install the recommended applications over here automatically or do it manually. Let's just go ahead and install the recommended apps. This will take a second. There's several different apps that need to be installed. As you can see over here, we're installing a web filter. We'll install the captive portal software, the firewall software, and so on. All right, the various applications have been installed on the server. I'm going to click OK. Now, notice that it did install a lot of things, such as web filters and virus blockers and spam blockers and phishing blockers and such like that. We're not going to deal with those today. What we do want to do, however, is come down here and configure the captive portal application. To do this, I come down here and click on Settings. And then I need to come over here to Capture Rules. First, we have to specify what traffic is going to be captured by the captive portal and redirected to the captive portal page. As you can see, we have a rule already predefined for us that is not enabled called Capture All Traffic on non-WAN interfaces, and that's probably the rule we want to use. Any traffic coming through this server that's being accepted on the internal network interface, we want to capture. Now, if we wanted to, we could edit it by clicking the Edit button, or we could just get rid of it altogether by clicking the Delete button. Let's go ahead and click on Enable. If we wanted to look at how the rule's configured, let's click on Edit. And basically all it says is any traffic received on any non-WAN connection will be captured and then redirected to the Capture Portal page. Go ahead and cancel. That rule will work fine the way it is. If we wanted to, we could add additional rules. If there's certain conditions you want met, then you could add them here. Usually this rule works just fine. Now we need to come over here to the captive page. Now we have three different options that we can use. We can provide just a basic message, which will just basically inform the user when they try to access the internet that they are going through the captive portal, and all they have to do is click continue to connect to the internet. We can require them to agree to certain terms and conditions before proceeding. If we want to, we can come down here and preview the page, see what it looks like. And so that's what it would look like. So we agreed to the terms and then click continue. Another option, however, if we scroll up, is to require login. If we click on basic login, then we can require a username and a password to be entered in order to access the internet. And if we use this option, then we need to come over here to user authentication. And we need to specify where the user accounts reside. We could configure just a local directory of user names and passwords. We could configure a radius server in order to authenticate users. Or if we have an Active Directory domain, this one's really useful. You can connect the Captive Portal to Active Directory and require the user to provide an Active Directory username and password in order to access the Captive Portal. For our purposes today, let's just make it simple. We won't require authentication. And back on the Captive page, we'll just provide the basic message and require the user to agree to the terms and conditions of the user agreement in order to access the internet. Okay, let's click OK. And our Captive Portal is ready to go. Okay, so at this point, let's test our Captive Portal. Let's boot up a Windows workstation on the internal network and have it associate with the access point. And then let's try to access an internet resource through the Captive Portal. All right, I booted up my Windows network system. If I come down here, I can verify that I'm getting an IP address from the Captive Portal, and I am. 192.168.1.159, that's from the pool that we defined. But you'll notice down here that I'm getting a little yellow exclamation point icon on top of my Network and Sharing Center icon, indicating that there's no internet access. Let's go ahead and see if we can fix that by accessing the Captive Portal. Open up Internet Explorer. And because we did not require authentication, all I have to do to gain access to the internet is to mark this option here. We'll click Continue. And we are now granted internet access. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we talked about the role and function of a Captive Portal. We first installed the Captive Portal software. We then configured the Captive Portal to require us to agree to terms and conditions before being allowed out on the internet. And then we set up a workstation on our